The journey of my truth and purpose. Welcome to Change the Conversation with the Hopefulist. My name is Wendy McClure, and it's time we had a conversation about living in a patriarchy and how that affects our lives. Together, we can make a difference and change the conversation. Hello and welcome. I thank you so much for being here. As we're making some changes here to the Hopefulist and changing the conversation with the Hopefulist, I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey, the path that has led me here, and why it's so important that I switch the focus somewhat to including some things that I did not talk about in the past. I'm going to start out with a quote, like I always do, from my You Are a Badass a Day calendar from my girl, Jen Sincero. And she says, living a life on purpose is truly where the party's at. And everything I'm going to talk about today leads back to that quote, that living a life on purpose is truly where the party's at. And the goal is to become the real, authentic version of yourself. Because when that happens, everything feels right. Everything feels like it's where it's supposed to be. You have a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction that you have never felt before. And the greatest part of it is that you know that you will get through whatever it is that you are going through because you are being true to yourself. So, let me talk a little bit about how the podcast has evolved in the last couple of years. You know, the original purpose was about my process of becoming an optimist after living a lifelong journey of being a pessimist. And if you remember, what I talked about was the fact that once I realized I was no longer really a pessimist, and it took a while, it didn't happen overnight, but it was still very difficult for me to call myself an optimist. And that's how I came up with the name, The Hopefulist. Well, I'm hopeful that someday I'll be able to call myself an optimist. And hence, The Hopefulist was born. And obviously, I don't want to get rid of that because it's very near and dear to my heart. And you know me as The Hopefulist. And I want to continue to encourage you to live a more positive life. But I also want to include some other things that may have been holding you back for a lot of your life. And you may have not even realized it because we grew up in a way to not question things, that this is the way that things have always been. And when you hear evidence to the contrary, your first instinct is to say, no, that's not right. But in a lot of cases, it is right. And that's what I want to do here is I want to expose a lot of the things that we have just grown accustomed to that have held us back in our lives. And I wanted to start out with my own story about why this is so important to me. When I was growing up, I'm a member of Gen X. I know a lot of you listening are, and you know what I'm going through. You know, we were the forgotten generation, latchkey kids. We were left on our own. So when I was growing up, you know, kids were to be seen and not heard. We were not allowed to have opinions. So when I was growing up, I was made to feel like I didn't matter. What I wanted didn't matter. My dreams didn't matter. Nothing really mattered. And it took me a long, long time to get out from under that. Most likely one of the reasons I was a pessimist most of my life. So I had done a lot of work in trying to overcome that and to change that. And when Roe v. Wade was overturned last June, it brought all of that back to me. It brought all of that feeling of what I want doesn't matter back. And I had a visceral reaction to it. it was very traumatic, in fact, for me, because it threw me back to a time that I didn't like. So what this means for all women is that they are now being controlled. They don't have the choice to make the decisions to shape their own lives. And it's not even a matter of whether you believe in abortion or you don't believe in abortion, because they're taking the option away from everyone. You know, before it was, if you don't believe in abortion, then don't have an abortion. But that doesn't mean that you get to impose your beliefs on me. Well, that's now changed. And it's gone so far to the extreme at this point that women are being held accountable for murder charges. They're talking about death penalty sentences for women. They're going to lock up doctors. And they're doing all of this in spite of the fact that they know many women are suffering greatly because of these bans. Women that want to have their babies and then medical complications come around. And it's an awful, traumatic time for these women. And yet they're still being told there's nothing we can do for you. There's nothing we can do for you. And yet the extreme laws keep coming in spite of all of this knowledge, which just makes women second-class citizens. It puts us in a position where we cannot make our own decisions about our own lives, about the saving of our own lives. And I just can't believe that I live in a country in 2023 that has women as such second-class citizens. So my commitment is to protecting women and to fight for equal rights for women in this country. So in the past year, I've done a lot of research into the patriarchy and how far-reaching it is. As I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of times when you first hear something that you'll claim, well, this is a result of the patriarchy, you kind of just go, I don't know, that seems like a stretch. But the more you delve into it, the more you realize it is the truth. And that's what I'm looking to do here, is I want to tell you all of the far-reaching consequences that the patriarchy has had on women throughout your life. And as long as it continues, it will affect the lives of your children and your grandchildren and many generations to come. And so I think it's time that we change the conversation around patriarchy and stop acting like the rules that the men put in place that are designed for their comfort, for their ability to do what they want without consequence, and to change that into actual reality. Because there are so many things that have been worded, that have been legislated, that have been in front of the courts when it comes to medical research. There are all kinds of things that women weren't even taken into the equation. And that's why a conversation needs to be had. So as I've been on this journey the last year, I've been discovering this authentic version of myself. Now, that had been happening for a few years before that, but now I know that what I'm doing now, is my purpose, because what I am doing is fighting extremely hard for women to have the same choices in life that men have, to be equal participants in this country, to make the decisions for their life and their family as they choose, not because of some law. And I'm leaning into this version of myself, leaning into it. And the more I've thought about it, it's really not that different from the person I've always been. I've just embraced it now, where before I kind of fought it off. You know what I mean? Like I just always felt like I was a little too much and I was a little too outspoken. And, I just was different. And I say that because I've always been a fighter. When I was in my early 20s, it sounds a little ridiculous now, but when I was in my early 20s, my cable company got rid of MTV. And, MTV was just still, the biggest thing ever when I was in my early 20s. They actually showed videos back then. And I fought the cable company, and I fought hard. I fought hard against the cable company. And it took a really long time, like over a year. But we won. We got MTV back on the cable channel. And, that entailed going to meetings, that entailed organizing and showing up at places where we would question the people from the cable company. And, it was a lot of township council meetings and that kind of stuff. And that's what I'm doing again. I'm going to marches. I'm going to events to try and get names on petitions that women will have access to the care that they need. I'm volunteering to write out cards to encourage people to vote. I am changing the conversation around the patriarchy. And this feels good. This feels good to me. But aside from the MTV thing, after I graduated college, I wanted to get into the music industry. And I ended up getting in radio, and I stayed there until just a few years ago. And that is a very, very competitive field, very male-dominated competitive field. So I have had to fight for every job that I have had, and I have had a lot because getting fired in radio is very common. So that is another area where I've always been a fighter. I fought to make my dream of living at the Jersey Shore a reality. And with the help of my husband, I was able to do that as well. And I love living here. I knew that that would be such a factor in me being a happier person. And I was absolutely right. I love living at the Jersey Shore. I live on the water. I get to see the boats go by every day. And it's just as wonderful as I imagined it would be. Not every day. Sometimes there's some boats that go by that are blasting their music a little too loudly. Sometimes the neighbors are getting a little too loud. Nothing is perfect. Nobody's life is perfect. But I'll take it. And I've discovered that I love this version of myself, this true, authentic version of myself, the one that speaks up and speaks out and fights for what I believe in and doing what I can to secure equal rights for women in this country. And sadly, I have lost some friends along the way. I've been ghosted by a few. I've gotten into arguments with family members. But this is what I remember at the end of the day. I'm doing what I know is right for me. My truth is doing exactly what I'm doing. And I'd rather lose people in my life for being myself than keep them and pretend to be someone I'm not. Because I think a lot of us have done that for most of our lives. We've put on a certain air or act in front of certain people. You act one way in front of work people. You act one way in front of your friends. You act another way in front of your family. And I'm not saying that you can, go into a work meeting and just belch and, eat with your hands. No, of course not. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that the versions should not be that different. So as even though it is sad, it is hurtful to me that I have lost some people that now I guess don't like the real version of myself. And honestly, if someone has a problem with me fighting for women, then I guess I'll see you later. Because I think it's rather sad and selfish that they aren't fighting for women. That is just the way that I see it. Because I have come to love this real, authentic version of myself, I am extremely proud of myself. And until you get to that place, you have no idea how okay you will be with no matter what happens in your life. Like I said, it is sad and disappointing and depressing at the amount of people I have seemed to come at odds with. But if they have a problem with me doing what I'm doing, then that's really their problem. Because I'm not hurting anybody. I'm not asking anybody to do what I'm doing. I think more people should be doing what I'm doing, but I'm not asking anybody to do that. I have come to find that a lot of women get very uncomfortable when you start talking about the patriarchy, because women hold on to their own power by being in proximity to the patriarchy. And it makes them uncomfortable to talk about. And maybe that's the reason why people have drifted away from me. But no matter what their reason is, I always come back to this. I'm proud of myself. I am proud of the work that I am doing. And I go to bed feeling really good about myself each and every night. So like I was saying, when you get to this point, which is the goal, you will be okay with what happens in your life. It is still sad to lose friends, to not talk to family members, but I still love me and what I'm doing. So now I want to expose the patriarchy and let you know all of the ways that it has truly held you back from being your true self. If you think about it, the things that you already know and may not have been even acknowledged, the fact that we have been tone policed our entire lives from our mothers, mostly for our own safety. We've been told to keep it down, to not act out, to not make a scene. God forbid, don't be hysterical. Don't get upset. Only men are allowed to get angry. Women are not. We are told to make ourselves smaller, even in the physical sense. Women are supposed to be teeny tiny. And we're constantly being told to be polite, to be nice, to get along. And a lot of this is not corresponding to the people we truly are inside. And as I mentioned, the safety part of it, a lot of mothers have done this for the safety of their daughters. And I get it. I know that loud women do often get themselves in trouble. And it's a matter of changing the conversation so that women can feel able to say what they want to say without fearing the repercussions of being hurt or, God forbid, killed. Because when it comes to the breakdown of what men are afraid of versus what women are afraid of in this life, and this is going to be a real eye-opener for you. Men's primary fear in this life is to be humiliated. That is their primary fear in life. There are studies on this. Women's primary fear is to be assaulted and or killed. That's a drastic difference. So women are taught to be small for their own safety, and I get it. But we have to start making the changes so that women are allowed to be who they truly are. It is the only way to live a fulfilled, satisfactory life. And that's why I want to change the conversation. I want to expose the patriarchy in all of the ways that it has trained you and conditioned you to be a certain way, and how it has held you back from being your true self. And once we pull that back and you become the person you've always meant to be, and you will feel fulfilled, that is, and satisfied, that is when true life really begins. Going back to the quote, living a life on purpose is truly where the party's at. So this is my wish for you and the goal of this podcast. Stripping down the patriarchy, showing the ways that it has held you back, and allowing yourself to become the real, authentic version of you. And I sure hope you come along for the ride, because I'm super excited about this. I just want to help women in any way possible. I'm still fighting for women to get the rights that they deserve in this country. I was just at an event yesterday gathering signatures. It was Doggy Derby Day in Lacey Township. And yes, I was there. I was checking out all the little doggies, and I'm going to put some of the pictures that I took in my Instagram stories later today. So check that out. If you're not following me on Instagram, please do, at @the_Hopefulist. That's where you can find me on most social media platforms. So what do you think? You want to come along for the ride? I sure hope you do, because this, I feel, is the most important thing that I have ever done in my entire life. And I'm doing it for you. I'm doing it for me. And I'm doing it for the many generations to come after us. So if you like today's episode, please give me a review. Hit that subscribe or follow button and share it with your friends. You can just copy the link to this podcast and send it right to a friend who you think might resonate with it. And, please spread the word. Change the conversation with the Hopefulist a topic of conversation. I just came up with that right now. Isn't that cute? I kind of like it. Okay, so now I want you to go out there and be your badass self. Thank you for joining me in this conversation. Together, we are better. Please visit my website at hopefulist.com and remember to hit that subscribe or follow button.